Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Ignite. This week I am joined by Elena Höge. Elena, welcome.
Thank you so much. No, I'm glad to be here.
Elena, maybe you can just start off by telling us a little bit about your business. What is it? And then we'll talk a little bit about your background.
Yes, so my business is called Yaldi Games, and essentially it's all about making games that have real life knowledge inside of them. So it really is like my way of saying, I love games, but let's add a little bit of real life knowledge, a little bit of outside of game value to gaming.
Amazing. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? What was school like for you?
Well, I'm from Germany, and in Germany we have a very, very tough school system. It's actually it's separated in three different tiers, and only the top tier get to go to university. So everyone can be very happy that you are not in Germany, because it's a very, very hard system. So I was actually one point in all three tiers. So essentially, I worked myself up because, when I was very young, I wasn't able to study so well. I couldn't retain information so well. But then I got better and better at it as I grew. And then I ended up being in the top tier, which allowed me to go to university. That has really had a big effect on my life. And that's why I think learning is so important to me.
So what kinds of things did you like to learn when you were young? What were you passionate about?
I really loved history, and that's why I really loved the game called Assassin's Creed, because in the second Assassin's Creed you were in Italy, and you could walk around Italy and like Venice and Florence, and you could talk to Leonardo da Vinci, and you could experience that. And because I loved history and then I loved gaming, I just saw that this game did so well in incorporating knowledge into the core gameplay, but it was still a really fun game, and it sold millions of copies, and it just showed that it's a really good business. And so I was like, okay, I really want to make games like that. So something that uses my passion and knowledge, and then gaming.
And how old were you when you kind of had that spark of, ooh, I want to do this?
I think I was 16. Yeah,
Wow.
like 16 years old. I bought the PlayStation 3 and I played the first Assassin's Creed. So, yeah, very young.
And what were the first steps that you took to actually make it a reality?
Well, the first thing, of course, that I had to decide is what was I going to study after school. I first went into a fusion of business and IT, and then I realized that this type of IT wasn't actually gaming related. So then I moved to gaming. So that's when I moved to Scotland, and I studied design and digital media at the University of Edinburgh. And I think those are the most important choices that you'll make, because those essentially set up what you learn and the portfolio that you're building and the experiences. Because if you want to get a job in games, you need to have made some games, and either you do that in your free time, and that is like these days you can absolutely just make games on your own. You can start young with board games and card games, and then you can download Unity and Unreal Engine for free, and then you can make games. You can get all courses online, but back then you couldn't really.
Fantastic. And for that choice, what made you choose Edinburgh?
Well, Edinburgh had this course called Design and Digital Media, and the nice thing about that was that it had three subjects that I could just decide what I was going to make the project about. So I could decide that I was going to make games, and it didn't require a portfolio, because a lot of the masters in any kind of game related field, they would have wanted me to put in a portfolio of all the games that I've created before, or all the art that I have created before, and I didn't have any of that. Like I came from this business background, like bachelor's degree, and therefore I didn't have any of that. And that course allowed me to just apply without any portfolio, and then choose what I was going to do in those projects. So a lot of freedom. So definitely, like, I had a really fun time. Yeah.
That's great. And I think one of the things I also really like about that is, even though you knew you wanted to do games early on, you don't have to necessarily have made every great choice from the start, right? Like, you were able to kind of learn stuff from the work that you did in business and then make a switch.
Absolutely. And like for me, the business learning were extremely valuable. They're actually my main strength now, What I hear from the games industry is the craziest stories of like people coming from physiotherapy into gaming. And so it is in that way quite open, but it's also still very inaccessible in some other ways. So I think it is really important to look at what could you study that is related to gaming but could also give you a job somewhere else, because it's always easier to first work in a more accessible industry and then go into gaming. Because currently I have to say, like, the situation with the games industry and especially junior roles and like how few there are is really, like, it's sad.
But don't get discouraged if you can't get there right away, because you can learn things in one place and then move
so
and
many.
transfer. And so when did you actually create your first game?
When I was in uni, I created 3 game projects. One of them was like a time travel adventure game. So it's just one level where you could explore, but it was like 3D open world. And then I made a VR game where you could paint a little, like a town. So it was like a white town, you could paint on it. And then I did a 2.5D game about atmosphere. But those weren't published. So yeah, we're still working on our first game. It's called Out and About, and it essentially is just focusing on the foraging hobby and all of the plants and recipes that are like tied into that. And so you can learn about like 100 plants, 200 recipes, and make them at home.
Oh, where did the idea for that game come from?
That was from my own hobby of foraging. Yeah, like it's it started like one season before the pandemic. And so, of course, during the pandemic, I could just go outside and just pick lots of plants and flowers and just make different kinds of marmalades, jams, jellies, cordials. I had a great time because of, how much I was spending time outside. And I was a gamer before, so I pretty much spent a lot of my time just inside and playing games. After I started foraging, I went out, almost on a daily basis and just gathered things, and I think that is just a lot of fun.
And we're so lucky here in Scotland. We have all this amazing nature that we need to get out and we need to take advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the beautiful thing about Scotland is that even if the skies are grey, it's still beautiful.
Exactly. Fantastic. So tell me about the development of the game. So you were foraging, you came up with this idea of we need to get people outside, we need to inspire them about nature. What were the first steps that you actually took?
Well, the most important thing when you create a game is that you first decide what is the genre of the game, because that decides everything. Like, it's such an important decision. I went for the life simulation genre because I could see that Animal Crossing was doing really well at this point in time. So life simulators are all about having a character that you can customize, having a space. Sometimes it's a smaller map. Sometimes, in our case, we actually created an open world, so a larger open world. You needed to have characters, you need to build friendships with them, you need to just have that it's called core loop of like foraging, cooking, crafts, and then buying things and upgrading. And that's the most important decision, is like, what genre are you choosing? Who's your audience? So that's where the business part came in. I had to think about who's going to play this game. How old are they? What do they like? What art style do they like? Because that decided how we're going to make the game look and feel. And just step by step, we pieced everything together. Game design is a very lengthy process of constantly asking yourself lots of questions and also encountering lots of problems and then solving those. And at some point you come up with, you actually have this design document that says, okay, this is how the game's going to be. And then you can get programmers on board that are going to start implementing it step by step. So in our case, my sister is actually the first person to join my team. She's the person that has created the art style and the characters and all the plants. And so she joined with her best friend. So I got 2 artists right at the beginning, and then we got a programmer. I was acting as a designer. Thankfully, we have a designer now because he has made a major difference because I had to just focus so much on business. So ultimately, games need so many diverse people and so many diverse roles. And that's why everyone can find a place in gaming, because you need a lot of different people for it.
Amazing. And how is the development going? When can we expect the game to be on the market?
Well, we want to release into early access, which means it's not fully finished, but we will be able to, put it out there. It'll be like 10 hours gameplay time, and then we can add to it and we can work with the community. So it's going to be really fun. And that's going to be spring this year, because we want to release with the spring plants, and then we want to update the seasons over the course of the year. It does feel like there's still lots to do, and I don't think that goes away in game development. It always feels like you have a lot of things to do, and a lot of the games that people play probably had at least, I don't know, 30 to 50% just of planned content more on top, but they cut it because it just doesn't work timeline wise.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur so far. What have you loved the most about it?
Well, I do love the independence, the ability to just choose my own tasks and kind of arrange my own things. It does come with the responsibility to, of course, always know what needs to be done. I need to be the person to tell myself and, my team what priorities are. So, but I still like that. I like it because I can change things around, and there's so much flexibility around that. And just being able to work with really creative and cool people, right? Because I can decide who I would bring on board into the company. So that's huge. It really is all about the people that you bring in, because the people decide the culture. And I think for us, it's been interesting because all of us in the team, we really care about our work-life balance. And we don't do crunch or anything. That's the bad games industry thing where you hear people working 100 hours a week. Like, that's not never going to happen in our culture, because none of us would want that.
And it doesn't need to be that way to do cool things and important things.
Exactly, yeah. Like, the whole industry needs to get away from that.
Fantastic. But, even with that, even having decided that you're not going to have that kind of culture, it's obviously entrepreneurship has its challenges. It's not the easiest career path always. So what's been the greatest challenges that you've encountered so far?
Well, essentially, once you start employing people, you are responsible for someone else's livelihood and income and everything. And so for me, of course, the things that I always needed to do is get the next funding in and the more resources. And it's a constant need to go and look for investment or funding and constantly pitching. There's many grants that I've won. There's some that we didn't win and we could have really used for the team, getting basically like just lower salaries, lower than their industry standard would be. But because they believe in the product, we keep going. But yeah, it's all risky, because you never know where is the next money coming from. And some people, if they are very prone to stress, I can see that they would very much struggle.
How do you manage that? What are your techniques?
Well, I mean, just beginning of last year, I started with, morning routines. You get up, you do some stretching, you do some simple meditation. So basically just clearing your head. I'm a very healthy person in a sense that I sleep 9 to 10 hours. So I go to bed early. I always go to the gym in my lunch break. So at least 4 times a week. And I think these things really help me just be grounded and don't get burnout. And I think a lot of people, if they forget to do that, they invest way too much time and then they become like burned out, or maybe because they've have frequent failures, they lose motivation and the optimism. And it really is so important that if you are an entrepreneur, the thing that you're building, you should do that out of a sense of it's a calling rather than I want to make money. Because if I would have given up long ago if my main motivation for this business is money.
I think that is such a good point. There are so many people who sometimes are like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur to make money. And it's like, no, you have to be passionate about what it is you do, because that is what will drive you forward. That is what will get you through all of it. And ultimately, there are easier ways to make money if that's what you're,
absolutely
out there for. And I love hearing you talk about caring for yourself and the self-care aspect of it, because I think sometimes online, for example, there's all this like glamour about the hustle of being an entrepreneur and how you have to stay up all night and get up at 4 a.m. and this and that and the other. And it's like, that is just not sustainable. So if anyone wants to be an entrepreneur, you can't look after your team if you're not looking after yourself, the classic adage of that. So just a few more things in terms of, we've got lots of potential entrepreneurs listening to this. what would be your top tips for them in terms of what they should be thinking about? What do you wish you knew when you were in their seats?
I think it's all about mentorship. If I knew back then that I could have saved a lot of money and time if I had just found the right mentors to give me the right kind of advice. Like, for example, I won a lot of grants, and I put the money directly into creating features for the game. But, some of these features just weren't that important yet. So essentially, we spent money that we wasted because we are not using it, and it's just like, if I had known better, if I had found mentors that were in tune with the problems that I was facing, and in my case, that was actual game design. And I also should have actually looked into some really interesting, business books sooner, like Disciplined Entrepreneurship would have probably been a good book to get early on. To have a more solid start. And with that, I mean in terms of interviewing your audience and doing a lot of competitor research, a lot more than I did, because I was kind of mostly acting out of this kind of hunch, this gut feeling.
Just in terms of finding a mentor, any tips for how to find one?
Well, I mean, in Scotland, you've got a great mentorship system. You can also ask someone. It's really important that you actually be very thoughtful with it and really figure out which specific things you need help for. So actually, if I were to do it again, I would think of it as almost like writing a job description, because that way you have a different mindset, and it's okay, I need a mentor with these and these outputs. And then I think you'll be very successful at finding the right person. I think there's a lot of actually people willing to just help out and mentor someone.
So don't be afraid to ask for help, but be really specific about the help that you need.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you one last question. If there was one skill that you think someone who is looking to go into entrepreneurship should try to get when they're young, what might it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Ultimately, entrepreneurship is all about resilience. Resilience is built through, if you fall down, you get back up, right? So you should just always keep going. I think entrepreneurship, though, in a lot of ways where I see people that are being very successful with it, is that in the very young age, they're already thinking of how could I earn some extra pocket money. I think if you are in that mindset, that ultimately sets people, very young people, up for entrepreneurship already.
Scrappiness, just learning how to get stuff done and figure it out, because there will be all those moments when you're in a bind and you just have to do stuff. I always think also with entrepreneurship, there's the glamour of it, but then there's also this sort of really not very glamorous tasks that all have to get done. And so if you've been doing that and getting creative and getting scrappy from a young age. Elena, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. Any final words for our audience?
Well, I'm in love with entrepreneurship because I think, ultimately what we do is we look at the world and we see problems and we see solutions. It's a really active mindset that just really is striving towards the benefit of people, the improvement of things, finding solutions, helping people live better. And I think it's a really rewarding lifestyle, and especially a really rewarding community. Because you'll meet a lot of really cool people, Well,
thank you so much. It has been wonderful to speak with you. I am super excited for your game to come out. We will be looking for it, and wishing you all the best. And thank you.
Thank you so much.